Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Bhutang dhammang sanghang namasami. So this is Sutta Class 5 for Vasa 2022, and we're working on the Satipatthana Sutta, Part 2. Didn't finish it off last time, but this is one of the more important of the discourses the Buddha gave, as well as the theory we get from the three cardinal discourses. This is the one which gives us some introduction to practice, and it's quite extensive. I think actually on one of the rains retreat, I did the whole rains retreat was just on this one teaching, if you remember. Maybe you weren't here 3 or 4 years ago. You didn't check the YouTube channel, haven't seen my previous teachings. But if you really want a really detailed analysis, but anyway, this is sort of like a more general approach. As we're doing we're following sort of the progressive teaching, the progressive path of practice, if you remember, right? You know, faith in the Buddha, and then going forth, and then morality, and then a life of contentment, simplicity and contentment, sense restraint, mindfulness and clear knowing, then development of samadhi, collectedness, and then the breakthrough to enlightenment. So we're still not quite at the end yet. We're still mindfulness and clearly knowing. So if you remember from last time, sati means to remember, right? You remember? Been developing sati in the meantime. You remember? But it's a particular kind, and I was just reflecting, some of the words the Buddha had limited. He had this profound experience of awakening, then he tried to express it in ordinary language. So many times the words failed, of course. People try to define who are you, for example. The Buddha just finally said, the Tathagata is measureless. You can't describe the Tathagata, the Buddha, in ordinary worldly language. So sometimes he had these, insights into the path of practice, like the sati, I would say. Then he had to find a word which was close enough to try to explain it. Just like in English now, we try to translate Pali words. And, when I wrote my last book over 5 years, I changed some of these translations, half a dozen times I changed them. One word I translated as quite literally, and then I thought about it again, and that doesn't quite fit the better. So maybe this is also with the word sati. The Buddha had this experience of this quality of mind, which he tried to explain. They had to use a word which was available at the time. This was the closest he could come to, maybe. So what sati means to remember, and you can say, Venerable Analayo, in his book, he says that, basically he says it's to remember the present moment when it's developed. You remember the present moment. Most of us think of memories, in the past somewhere, but to recollect yourself or remember to be in the present moment. That's what sati is when it's developed. But it is a special kind of awareness. Sometimes I use the word awareness rather than mindfulness because it gets, sometimes using these jargon words, they just get so jaded. They can't, mindfulness, what's that? The word actually came from a translator in the Victorian era, 1880s. He's the one who coined the word, so it's not, do you hear that word much these days when you're at work? Be mindful? You do now, okay, well, it's coming back into vogue now. But maybe in the wrong context though, you see. Yeah, more in a secular context rather than what the Buddha was talking about in terms of the quality for spiritual practice as a factor of awakening. See? But to refresh your memories, sati is an objective, non-judgmental awareness. Yeah, that's actually quite an advanced stage already, non-judgmental. Just being aware, observing what is going on. It's an aloof, uninvolved observation of the facts. Just acknowledging what's there. Most people aren't able to do that. As soon as they notice something, immediately they get into judgment and I like and dislike and it's good and it's bad. But anyway, the sati, we're developing the sati, this quality of awareness. And it's also, you can say, it's a quality which is it's very close to attention. But I would say it's an educated attention. It's what to pay attention to. You could be mindful of, virtually anything, really, if you wanted to be. There are some people who have their special hobbies, I remember one of my wanderings around in England, when we went to Europe, we tried to follow as best we could kind of the Thai forest tradition with a few adaptations, quite a few adaptations. But one of them was that we'd try and go on this wandering tours, you see. Tudong. But in the West, we couldn't just wander in any village and go an alms round, you see. Although some monks did it, and they were able to, some places they're well supported, especially former Catholic countries, Ireland and Italy. Of course, in Italy, you might get a bottle of wine. So anyway, one of these wandering trips, it was a bit concocted, a bit organized tudong, you see. Ideally, it's supposed to be kind of you just wander to seek out places of solitude. But this is Europe, so it had to be a bit more organized, you see. So there was a talk in Bath, which was the West Country in England. Bath is, I think it's its own county, Somerset maybe, in the West. And there was a talk 2 weeks later in northern Wales. Northern part of Wales or South England, I forget, in the Shrewsbury. Interesting names. So I agreed to give these two talks and walk between the two places, you see, for 2 weeks. So there was myself, there was an Italian monk and an English Anagarika walking with us. And it just so happened I had, one of my hobbies when I was younger was looking at stones, rocks, and geology. So my brother and I had a rock collection. So I looked at rocks. The Italian monk, he went on a retreat with this layman, sort of a wandering trip, looking at birds. And the Anagarika was interested in flowers. As we're walking along, I would say, look at that rock, and the Italian monk says, look at that bird, and then the Anagarika says, look at that flower. And I don't notice flowers very much. I do now because they're out, but and he didn't notice rocks, so we shared our, what we were attentive to, you see. But maybe, well, if you look at these things in the right way, they can lead to some understanding, you see. Yeah. Like, as in the exercises here, you'll notice there's a certain pattern. Have you noticed a pattern? There's a certain very succinct, very clear pattern to this scripture. Besides the introduction part, then there's a very brief explanation of what to do, to contemplate the body as the body, with then you have with diligence, mindful and clearly knowing, and putting away desire and discontent. Right? Then there's the exercise, and then there is what's called a refrain, like a chorus. Remember the chorus? Internally, externally, arising factors, passing away factors. Yeah. Okay. Then there is the next exercise. Then there is this refrain again, exactly the same. Just changing those words of what you're observing. Then another exercise, and then the refrain, another exercise, and the refrain. So, if you learn that basic pattern, then it's just a matter of just changing the exercise. Okay. So once you get the basic exercise principle, understand that, you can apply it to these various different themes then. Then you just have to remember what the themes are. There's the four: body, feeling, states of mind, Dhammas. And each one of those has their particular details, you see. Like in the body awareness, kaya anupassana. There's 6 exercises. And I mentioned before, last time, they were sort of progressive, starting off with the very simple, basic ones, getting more and more specialized. So anyway, just to go back to the definition again, somebody asked about this. The definition, it says, to contemplate. We also define contemplation. For most people, unfortunately, I looked in the Oxford Dictionary, and there's a number of definitions. The first one is the right one. To contemplate means to look at very closely, to repeatedly look at something. Look at it again and again and again, to contemplate it. But some of the other definitions are to think about. I think most people in the West understand contemplation, thinking about it. I'll contemplate that idea. But sati is a direct experience beyond thinking. It's actually looking, being able to, like the word for contemplating, anupassana. Passana is a verb for seeing. Anu kind of accentuates it, so seeing again and again. You say it also at deeper levels. So maybe the first time you look at something, you just see the outer details. You look at it again, and then gradually you see more and more details. That's what to contemplate means. This is contemplate the body as the body, the first exercise, right? What does that mean? What it means is that you contemplate the body, but as a direct experience of body, the body as the body, not as a concept. Just try to experiment now. When you hear the word body, what impression comes to mind, the first impression? Is it a concept? This idea of body, this kind of abstract robot underneath your head here? Is it a visual image, your face in the morning in the mirror? Or do you go directly to sensation? How we know body directly is through touch, sensation. Now my eyes are open, so I see kind of a physical form here, a bodily form, but that's a mental. It's seeing. It's a sight. It is not a direct experience of body. It's just a vision of body. And if it's very quiet, I might be able to hear my heartbeat or something. Smell. If I haven't had a shower for a few days, Taste by toothpaste or something, but directly, body through touch. Body has, as one of the senses, its object is touch. So the Buddha is saying now to know the body not just as a sight, which can change. I have slightly different colors of brown as a sight. So my body changes from this kind of brown to a more red brown or something or other. But that's not really the body. That's just the image of it, a vision of it. You see. And of course, there's more happening in the body than just a heartbeat. See, as a body, that's part of it, but not the whole picture. You see. So we know body as sense of touch. So if you develop this exercise, then when you hear the word body, you'll be able to go directly to the experience, the sensation of body, sitting in the chair here, whether it's light or heavy, or whether it's compacted or spacious or whatever, or any particular sensation in the body, cold feet, hot air or something. And the same with the other ones, feeling as feeling. First of all, you have an idea what feeling is, right? And for Buddhists, we have to maybe get a definition first. And then there's a problem with the English language, because feeling for most people in English is emotion. How are you feeling? You don't say pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. You're feeling happy or sad or feeling okay or whatever. But behind those, in the Buddhist definition of feeling, Vedana, it is only pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. There's no emotion in it. Emotion is a state of mind. The happiness and sadness is a state of mind. It's not a feeling in Buddhism. So, I still have to sometimes stop and think about it. What's a feeling? Then I have to, okay, right. Sometimes, not all the time. Mostly now I got it. After 40 years of practice. And you say, feeling, Buddhist feeling, okay, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. But of course, even that has a direct experience when you can learn to have sati, know the feeling. It's quite a range, isn't there? I'll go back, I'll say back on body, yeah? Keep it simple. I'll probably come back to this again, the Satipatthana Sutta, in other classes, because there's a lot of material in here. See? I'll stay with the body at first. Keep it simple, if it's possible. The trouble is nowadays, as I've mentioned many times, that a lot of people these days are so disembodied, they can't sense their body anymore. Body, what body? They're up in their head about it. They're thinking about their body. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that, and same with feeling, How do you feel? Well, I think I'm okay. Well, feeling is not a thought. You missed it already. You already failed the test, the Buddhist test. So anyway, the refrain, which you hopefully remember, after the exercise, it does say to be aware of the body as internally, externally, and Venerable Anelio, Bhikkhu Anelio, yeah. He gives a different translation. He says here, in regard to the body, he abides contemplating the body internally, or he abides contemplating the body externally, or he abides contemplating the body internally and externally. And the refrain is a very, very important, maybe in some senses even more important than the exercise itself, because the refrain gives, with the refrain is a shift now in the kind of meditation we're doing. Basically, the shift is from what's called samatha, or focused attention on the exercise, breathing, the first exercise, breathing, to now looking at the characteristics, especially characteristics of arising and passing. So the meditation, this exercise then changes basically from samatha meditation to vipassana meditation. Rather than looking at the object, see, focusing on the object becomes an exercise, can become an exercise in samatha, developing samadhi, focusing on the object more exclusively. Or if you look at the characteristics now, you begin to contemplate, investigate the wider picture, the way things are as they rise and pass away. And so it's a very, very important change of emphasis, the refrain. I'll come back to it later at the end here, hopefully. And Analayo has a very interesting note in this book here. He quotes an American psychologist, I think it is. I forget his name now, but I won't. But you check the book out. Who did some studies of Western meditators, and what he found was one of the things he discovered was he said that one of the reasons why Westerners, I think it shouldn't be exclusive to Westerners, maybe it's more people in the modern day and age maybe, are slower to develop in their practice than people in the East, is because they get obsessed with focusing on the content of awareness. They get stuck on the content, just the breathing, watching the breathing, rather than being able to shift to observing the characteristics of it. The characteristics, besides internally, externally, but more important, are arising and passing. They are leading to an insight or a wisdom meditation, to seeing that these things are not yourself, impermanent, unstable, that's unsatisfactory, and not a permanent self. But you focus on the content of the awareness, content of sati, then there's a subject and an object, see, right? You're still maintaining a subjective view of, I'm observing my breath, you see, rather than observing this process of breathing happening, and not just in this body, externally too, all around. It's not my personal issue. Every human being anyway, breathes, right? And I think even maybe the bush turkeys, right? Do they breathe? Mosquitoes breathe? Have you ever noticed a mosquito breathing? I don't know. They have a nose, so they must breathe. Somehow they absorb oxygen, I think. I don't know. But anyway, most living beings breathe, you see. So it's not just my thing, is it? It's universal to sentient existence, basically. I think even the iguanas, I see the iguanas breathing, right? Very slowly, because they live a long time, I think. So the point of, especially internally, externally, and that's a little bit of a controversy over what they mean, but basically in the Pali language, and in the commentaries reinforce this, that internally is internally in this body, and externally is external bodies. So observing the breathing within yourself, then other people, even iguanas. That's externally. And then, of course, internally, externally together, to balance out. Okay. So this exercise can lead to, first of all, it's going beyond the surface appearances of things. Observing this breathing process internally, not just thinking about breathing and knowing that people breathe, but you begin to observe it as a whole process, a deep process. And then the externally, you can say internally if we, like all these exercises, they start off with internally anyway, but they can lead a bit to overbalance to introversion. Become so self-absorbed, you see. My breathing, my feelings, my states of mind, etc. So you can get a bit overbalanced that way, imbalanced. And then observing things externally, which a lot of people do too. Like a lot of people don't really know their own mind or know their own body. They can see other people's body out there and give a lot of attention to it maybe, but not their own body. Then that can lead to what's called extraversion. Everything's projected out there, you see. For example, noticing especially emotions in people, like states of mind in other people. They're the ones who's angry. I never get angry. They get angry. Look at them, But just, as Ajahn Chah would say, bring it home. Be able to reflect that back into yourself and, gee, maybe there might be some anger here too sometimes, if I'm really humble. But you notice there's some people, they always blame the external, right? It's one of the biases. All the problems are out there, they're never in here. And everybody keeps away from you, but the problems are out there. No problem in here. I wonder why I have no friends, but because the problem's out there, They really don't appreciate how wonderful I am, that's the trouble. That they're so ignorant, they can't appreciate how wonderful I am. That's why I don't have any friends. There are people like that, Not me, of course, but and then, of course, doing it both internally and externally, again, it breaks down this kind of dichotomy between, me and them, you see. It's internal, external. I mean, everybody's breathing. So when you look at the world from the point of view of breathing, we're all one, even with the animals. Huh? We're unified with all the animals, So we're all unified under breath, you see. We're all breathing the same air. Huh? How about that? Can get a little bit stuffy. And of course, it also, it kind of gives you an awareness of a bigger picture, like this is this sort of universal, and it's beyond my breathing only, and it's a universal principle. So you can get you begin to get a perspective on yourself in relationship to this bigger picture. Like I say, we're all part of the process of breathing here. So it helps dissolve this usual reference to self all the time. And then, of course, the second part of this is to notice the nature of arising of these different exercises. The first exercise is the breathing, of course. Nature of arising of breathing, the nature of passing away, and the nature of arising and passing away. And this is where it becomes, you can say, particularly Buddhist, right? The Buddhist principles, some of the Buddhist, the characteristics of existence, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, anicca, dukkha, anatta, no permanent self. And the opening, in most of when the Buddha explains this, especially if you want to talk about, say, no permanent self, anatta, the opening usually is impermanence, because that's the easiest to see, I would say, without too much conceptualizing. Think about, no permanent self, people start to get a little bit fuzzy in the head, What? I don't exist? Come on here. But if you notice breathing, arising and passing, well, who is breathing? Where is the self within that? What's breathing? Who's breathing? Huh? You don't need to think about it. You can observe it as a process. Okay? The breath goes on whether you try and control it or not. I wouldn't suggest you try it, but if you try and stop breathing, you can't do it. you just pass out from lack of oxygen. Then body will start breathing again when you're unconscious, automatically. You think we control our breath, but breath controls you, really. So there's also the nature of arising and the nature of passing away. So we go through these various exercises in all of them, body, feeling, states of mind. This refrain keeps repeating itself again and again and again. So first of all, the first exercise is to be aware of that particular theme, first of all. It also continues on here that sati is established, that there is body, feeling, states of mind, just enough for bare knowledge and continuous mindfulness. Bare knowledge, that's the ultimate, kind of perspective of sati, and then panya, wisdom. See? So there's no sati is a basis, as it were, not the end in itself, the basis to lead to knowledge. And then one abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. I say, like, being independent means that you have a direct experience yourself. First of all, we listen to the Buddha. The Buddha says, be aware of the body. And you say, well, why? Well, because if you observe the body, you can observe anicca, impermanence, and dukkha and anatta, you see. But then once you have that experience, you don't need to just believe the Buddha. Don't need to have to even read the instructions about it. You had a direct experience. You're independent. Aha! I got it. I know now. Yes. First of all, I just had to believe the Buddha that it was a good idea to observe the body, which leads to impermanence, be aware of a permanent impermanence, etc. But now I see it. I know it. I'm not clinging to anything in the world. So one is actually then almost liberated if we have that really deep insight. This is the way the body is. So you can be liberated from the body. Until you understand how the body really is, we still have attachment to it. We still cling to it as mine. So this is, it's starting off with the very simple exercises, just being aware of the breathing, for example, and then internally, externally, and I say this is it takes a little bit of knowledge to understand these principles, because mindfulness can be directed to anything. You can sit out there all afternoon gazing at flowers and probably not be any the wiser. Yeah, maybe if you do it long enough, you'll see the flowers wilting and, impermanent. They start to stink, unsatisfactory. and they're no permanent self, because they aren't there to just delight me. They're there on their own principle, not for me. But some of these things, like I mentioned about, my trip to geology. I wanted to find out the most permanent thing in the world. I want to find some real solid basis in life, you see. So I thought rocks are the most solid thing in the world, Then when I was studying geology, at one time the professor said, well, rocks are also crumbling away, It just takes a longer time, that's all. These rocks around here have been here for, 500 million years, But they're falling apart, right? Yeah, they're crumbling away. There's sand, some of it's sand down here now, see? But if you want to contemplate the impermanence of rocks, you got a long wait. You got to sit up on Mount Stupa waiting for the rocks to crumble. But your breath comes in and goes out, quite a few times in the meantime, right? So it's easier to observe the arising and the passing from your breathing, than observing rocks. Yeah. Or even flowers. Even flowers last for a few weeks maybe, see? So we come to the first exercise. The body as the body. And there are, in the body, contemplation, There are 6 exercises. A couple of them are, well, again, it starts off with kind of simple ones, the breathing and the bodily postures and activities, which most of us are familiar with, but maybe we don't have mindfulness specifically. We go through these motions, we breathe, many times every day for a whole life, and how many people notice their breath, except when they're hiking up the hill or something, or just walking up the steps here. And then it gets a bit more, a little more specific. The 32 parts of the body, the 4 elements. And then it gets very interesting with the 9 corpse meditations, right? And maybe they have to be a little bit abstract, corpse meditations, because we don't see too many corpses around here. But there's also a change in the wording of how one should regard these exercises. The first 2 exercises, there's 4 exercises in breathing. Yeah? Notice that? Long breath, short breath, experiencing, and training, right? Yep, you didn't read it in detail. It's not just watching the breath. There's other parts to it. Experiencing the whole breath body. Yep. And then considering, training? Is it training? Calming the bodily formation. So this is the 4th one. Calming. So there's knowing when the breathing is long, knowing when the breathing is short. And then there's experiencing the whole breath body. It says the whole body, actually, the sabba kaya. And then there is the calming of the bodily formation. So the wording changes too in the exercise. The first 2 exercises of breathing, it's knowing when there is a long breath, knowing when there's a short breath. I also, sometimes on a retreat, just to get people to be more attentive to the breathing, you can also add a few more things to it, not just long and short, but deep and shallow, relaxed or tense, whatever. Helps you get a little bit more awareness of breathing itself, as well as the experience, the sensation of body in general too. And it starts off with the long breaths, because when you first come and sit, especially if you had to walk up to the sala, maybe, way up there, you're breathing long breaths. And then as you sit, they slow down, maybe the breaths slow down, perhaps. And then for the 4 postures, sitting, standing, walking, lying down. And then for the bodily activities, stretching and walking and eating and talking, and the wording is that you just to know them, knowing them, these. Again, with clearly knowing with mindfulness, this is what's going on here. For the other 2 breathing exercises, experiencing the whole body and calming the bodily formations, then the wording changes to training. One trains the mind to experience the whole body. One trains the mind to calm the bodily formation. And then when it comes to the elements, for the 32 parts of the body and the 4 elements, then one is to consider them. So you have to kind of think about them, if you like. Think about the 4 elements and the 32 parts. And it requires a little bit more of a reflective awareness until you can get to the direct experience. Especially when it comes to something like the 32 parts. There's some parts of the body are reasonably obvious, right? Your fingernails or your skin. But can you sense your kidneys or liver? Huh? Lungs maybe, lungs, because they're breathing, they're moving, you know. And the heart maybe, because it's beating. But can you experience, I had to look in a anatomy book to find out where the liver was, actually. Spleen, what's the heck, what's a spleen? And then you try, you know, where is it in the body, but it still didn't talk to me. I don't speak spleen language. so I have to kind of imagine to some degree, you see. So you have to consider it. But basically, you know, it's recognizing that there are these various organs doing various different things to the body, you see. Different parts, they're doing have different activities in the body. And they all have to work together. I mean, you just taking your heart out of your body separately is not going to survive very long, or your lungs out or something. They have to all work together, right? And then the last one, the corpse meditations, it says comparing. One compares them. One compares, you know, this body to this decaying corpse here. You know, and there's various stages of decay, right? From the kind of the body cold and dead, and then it begins to bloat up, and then become festered and oozing, and this going to be censored, or bones, and then scattered bones at the end. This is Buddhism. We don't beat around the bush here. No pictures, though. So go back to the most basic exercise, breathing. That's the first one. And I guess you could say, well, the breathing is the most common meditation exercise, and most used and most talked about breathing meditation. But different ways we can do it. There's a variety of ways you can look at the breathing. But this one, it just says, you know, beware when the breath is long, one knows breathing in long. When breathing out short, one knows one is breathing out short. Okay. And then to experience the whole body, there's a little bit of discussion what that actually means, because it can mean the physical body. Some teachers actually explain it as a physical body, so you become aware of the whole body breathing. That's how I usually explain it too. That you first of all, you're aware of it says that the exercise in this, you know, you go to a quiet place, a forest, root of a tree, a quiet place, and then you bring up mindfulness in front of you. And then being in front of you also can be taken literally or a bit more abstract. Can be the right to the very front, which is your nostrils, or it can just mean to the forefront of your attention. Some teachers do emphasize the nostrils. Beware the breathing at the nostrils, the sensation of breathing. Others, they use other points of the body, some of the chest, rising of the chest, or the solar plexus, or some of the abdomen. So it can be, sometimes it could refer to the whole physical body breathing. You know, when you're aware of breathing, first of all, if you breathe deep enough anyway, the air passes through the nostrils, begins to fill out the lungs begin to expand. Yeah, the solar plexus rises, and then the body collapses again. Expands and contracts with the breath. But sometimes in the developing of focused attention, it's helpful to have one point, not to get too complicated or experimental. Just one point, the nostrils here, for example. But sometimes it doesn't work either. Sometimes it just your mind is too restless, or it just you can't settle on it enough. So maybe using the whole body breathing, body rising and expanding and contracting, can be helpful sometimes. Beware of how it happens when it's long. And just when you take a long breath, for example, a deep breath, you notice how the different muscles, many of us, we going to school for whatever it is, 12 years, something like that, we sit desks hunched over like this. The breathing is not really natural anymore. It's very constrained. And then what happens is, with the breathing is not deep enough, don't get enough oxygen, so your brain is oxygen deprived, it's more dull and sleepy, and you end up kind of crumpling up. But if you sit up straight, it does actually, the exercise do say, sitting with your legs crossed, sitting up straight, the back up erect. And you can pull back slightly on your shoulders, just to open the chest up. Most of us sit a bit hunched. And it does allow more room in the lungs for the air to circulate. And then you naturally breathe deeper. More oxygen into the body, into the brain, more alert. Ideally. Have to be careful not to strain too much, because then you get a backache. But you just push back slightly on the shoulders, you notice that it does open up your chest somewhat for breathing. Or it can be, other teachers say that the whole body is really I think it's the commentary says it actually is the breath body, the body of breathing. So it's like following the breath inside your body. Internally, you can follow it inside and out again, into your lungs and out. Or the whole body physically itself, rising, expanding and contracting. Whatever works. There's even one teacher who talked about, using the breath in various ways. It's just a minor point. I won't even mention who it is, but he talked about breathing in through the top of your head and breathing out through the bottom of your feet and breathing out through this side of the head and out that side of the head. And I tried it, and I was so dizzy from all the. I think I got some kind of wind illness. But I can understand his point in a way, because just observing the breathing can be so monotonous and so boring that maybe you need a bit of change, maybe. But in another sense, it is very useful that it is very, very similar, very, very calming, very quietening, very, very soothing. The breathing in, breathing out, no excitement, no confusion. As long as you don't have any kind of trauma around breathing, it can be very relaxing, just breathing. And as you breathe, the body calms down and relaxes, and so it can become a very good exercise for calming the mind too. And it actually, the last exercise in the breathing meditation is also to train calming the bodily formation. And this is Kaya Sankara, I think it is, which the commentaries say is in and out breathing. So it's actually saying to calm down the breathing process. You train yourself that way. And the idea was, ideally we don't try to control the breathing at all. Just observing the breathing. In the yogic tradition in India, they do have exercises, pranayama, that deal with controlling the breath, you see. Breathing in through one nostril, out the other nostril, and holding different lengths of time and things. But the Buddha just gave the exercise to observe the breathing as it is. So the bodily formation can be the breath, or it can be also just the physical body. The body itself, calm the body down, because some of us have, background of anxiety or something. You just be able to sit quietly, and, many people find it very hard just to sit quietly, right? They're always fidgeting and they'll do something and restless, and so train the mind to calm the body. Bring the body here, breathing in, breathing out. With that thought in your mind, calming. And maybe it does help the body It's very, very calm. When the body is calm, many times it makes the mind calm as well. So they're interrelated, body-mind, you see. So the other, that's the breathing exercises, okay? You got that? I mean, this is only the first exercise, I mean. It's already 2:51. But I'll mention two more exercises. The 4 postures, these are pretty simple, standing, walking, sitting, lying down. And basically the idea is generally it says for the breathing, you sit cross-legged, but it doesn't necessarily mean, I don't think, in India they didn't have chairs, and so the only thing to be able to sit was to sit cross-legged on the ground, you see. Nowadays we have chairs, so I don't think it necessarily is confined to only sitting cross-legged. And as now we have familiarity with other traditions, so we know that there are, there's the Japanese way of sitting, on a stool, and you put your legs underneath, different kinds of sitting postures. I think some of the books introducing meditation give you different postures. There's the Pap-Piap in Thailand, not so nice because you got to twist yourself, yeah. But then there's the cross-legged one, there's the half lotus, the full lotus, there's the what they call the American Indian one. I think you're doing American Indian, are you? But actually you put your ankles underneath your calves here, like, you don't put your feet up on here. Yeah, like that, like that. I think like that. It's sort of American Indian, they call it. But then you get sore ankles, but they all have advantages and disadvantages. Yeah, there's that one, yeah. Yeah. Or you can use a bench and whatever, yeah. Anyway, there's from the sitting, there's also the standing and the walking and lying down. So the idea is to try to maintain these exercises in all these 4 postures. And some teachers talk about, balancing the postures, which I think is a little bit to be taken too literally. Like they say, you should only lie down for 4 hours or something, brother, and you only sit 4 hours and stand 4 hours and walk 4 hours, and that's only 16 hours in a day, isn't it? Oops, we're short. You can hover for 8 hours or something. Swim maybe. This is Australia, right? You can swim for 8 hours. Maybe you can dance like Ollie. But the point is that staying in any one posture has its strengths and weaknesses. Sitting a lot can lead to dullness. Walking a lot can lead to restlessness. So many teachers have balanced these out. Lying down, they also say to try and, when you lie down mindfully on your right side, thinking of waking up, and trying to follow your breathing to the last minute when you fall asleep. Since you wake up in the morning, you start breathing, you be aware of breathing again. So you maintain a certain continuity with all these postures now. Now, likewise with the various activities, the bodily activities, the different activities, they also, different people, different temperaments have different activities. Some people, for example, they dress very quickly, others very slowly. Some eat very quickly, some eat very slowly. But you bring attention to your activities, not saying it's good or bad, just bring attention to it, and you can notice that a lot of these are just mindless habits we pick up. Sometimes we don't know the arising and the passing away of effects. A practical one I would say is that, you eat too fast without being mindful, you're going to have digestive problems eventually. Other times maybe you eat too slowly, you're indulging the food maybe, tasting every morsel and, whatever is your preference. But when you notice that, then you maybe can recognize, oh, here I am indulging in the food, why is that? I have a food craving because I feel lonely or something, and you can mention you can also notice from the physical awareness of physical sensations, there is also a mental connection. So it provides a very good foundation for developing collectedness or samadhi, but also is a good prelude to feelings and states of mind. Your state of mind influences how your body react in your body. Your body reactions influence how you think. When you're rushing around, notice, like, just a few days ago, I was late for something. Was it late for the meal, maybe? Yeah. So I rushed in here, and and I got the meal, and I got back, and I was a bit flustered when I'm eating. And would you believe I got stomachache? I have to come early and practice calming the bodily formation, train myself with calming the bodily formation before eating. I was always a bit tensed up, you see, and it didn't go down. The meal didn't go down very well, you see. So, but noticing that, I noticed that. See, I was aware of that. Oh, right. You got to be careful with that, you see. Sensitive digestion. So anyway, the other three, actually, the 4 elements and the 32 parts of the body usually requires some study. Yeah, can you recite the 32 parts of the body? Do you do it in English? In English, hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, skin. So you know them all already. Yeah. At least literally. Yeah. Okay. 4 elements: earth, fire, water, air. Then it comes to the corpse meditations, but those are a little bit obscure, a bit hard to find corpses these days. Anybody want to volunteer? No. There was a dead rat down there a few weeks ago, wasn't there? But too late now. But no. It was near Cynthia's house. Yeah. Anyway, it's gone now. So you could have seen it in, it's observing the body in these states of decay, from just being lifeless to finally being scattered bones. So, but.
Do they have the graveyard like that for study, or for criminal study or something like that?
I don't know. I have no idea.
Kind of the graveyard like that for study.
Well, no, just, huh?
For forensic and criminal study, something.
Oh, really? Oh, nearby. Yeah. So we can make an appointment. Oh, we can make an appointment to go there? Anyway, so I don't want to get too far here. It's only the first few exercises, and the important thing is to be able to practice them, you see. Once we get the theory, and because it's, it is fairly complex, you could take this one discourse and study it for maybe the whole retreat. Go through each of the different exercises. And important to develop all the internal, external, arising and passing also. And as I mentioned, this is where the meditation shifts from what's called samatha, or calm meditation, to insight meditation. Calm meditation, is giving more emphasis to samadhi, or collectedness, and insight meditation is giving more attention, you can say, to mindfulness. And they're a little bit, they complement each other, but they're also fairly different. There are different kinds of attention. Samadhi is focused attention, focusing on one point, ideally. We try to develop a very focused, narrow focused attention. And when that focus gets very, very strong, you can enter into what they call absorption, absorbed into the object. See? And all the other external 5 hindrances and all the other distractions, they say, there's no more sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. Just the mind is totally absorbed in that one object. Whereas mindfulness, sati, is looking at the general characteristics, observing that there is arising and passing, there is internal, external. So it's a broad attention. I say educated because it's attending to certain things, the body, feelings, states of mind, very, very specific things that the Buddha recognized are important. And it's a broad awareness of those characteristics of those qualities. So samadhi is a very exclusive, focused attention, and sati is a very inclusive, broad attention. And the mindfulness, right mindfulness, sammasati, is in the Eightfold Path is before sammasamadhi. So it's like a foundation, as it were, foundation for samadhi. Mind is you're more aware of what's going on, and you can settle your attention there. Then it can become a jumping off point for samadhi. Whereas, samadhi sometimes becomes an end in itself, and if it doesn't have, basically, to be right samadhi, sammasamadhi, what is usually mentioned is the 4 absorptions, but what is most important is that it should include the other 7 path factors to be right. The Buddha practiced, of course, samadhi with his 2 first teachers in India, but he realized these advanced states of samadhi, without having right view, without having mindfulness, did not lead to nibbana. So he broke with that tradition anyway, and he developed his own approach based upon sammasamadhi and right view. And so we come to we can say maybe the goal and of insight meditation. The first level, stream entry. Ready for that? Yeah. When you begin to see clearly the first glimpse of impermanence, really. Yeah. And there is, when talk about stream entry, there is no mention of samadhi. No mention of needing samadhi. But what needs to be done is the mind is free from the hindrances. And of course, developing samadhi, the first absorption, requires the suspension of the hindrances, right? That's one of the most direct ways, you see. But the hindrances can be suppressed, or can also go into abeyance if you're really focused. You're listening very carefully to a Dhamma talk, for example. It was one of the ways, most frequent ways people realized stream entry was hearing a talk from the Buddha. Yeah, people who had seemingly no mention of previous spiritual exercises or practice, just listening to the Buddha. Of course, maybe it was the charisma of the Buddha after his enlightenment, that, of course, he knew what he was talking about, so it was very, very believable. But ideally, these two go together. The Eightfold Path includes sammasamadhi and sammasati also. So this Satipatthana Sutta is a very good foundation, see? But not to be taken as an end in itself. It is part of the Eightfold Path. So the development of that, ideally, some teachers say you just need one of these themes. Body awareness is all you need. Like I mentioned, the end of the scripture does say that developing these 4 satipatthanas will lead to the higher stages of non-return and arahant, developing all 4 of them. But maybe developing just one of them will lead to stream entry. Yeah. So anyway, we got an introduction to these practice of sammasati, introduction to it. Point is to practice now, and then maybe we'll come back to it in another of the sutta classes when you have more experience, more wisdom, and more sati.